I'm often fascinated by how relevant the Buddha's teachings are, even nowadays, after so many years, after the Buddha's own lifetime. Because how many other things from that time, from 2,600 years ago, do you know that are still very relevant in our present time and age? I cannot even count. I can't recall almost anything. Of course, the fact that we pay attention to the Buddha and his words and his teachings is also one of the factors why we know so much of it. And also the fact that many people have made a lot of effort to maintain these words, these teachings, so that nowadays we still have access to them. That's also a factor. But nonetheless, other traditions or other sages that existed even at the Buddha's time, none of them, we don't know much about them, about their teachings, their doctrines. Not much has survived until nowadays. There's very few outstanding people of whom societies have taken the trouble to write all their teachings down or to memorize them, as was done for the Buddha's teachings. Just imagine the immense effort it takes to memorize whatever a person says. Suppose somebody wants to know exactly what you said for the rest of your life, especially the important teachings. How much effort would it take just for one person to memorize all of that? It's amazing. That's why nowadays we have MP3 recorders. But at that time they didn't have these tools. So monks like the Venerable Ananda were sitting down, memorizing, and other groups also, practicing together, so that the Buddha's teachings can be maintained for a long time. And surprisingly, they have not only been maintained, but they're also still very relevant in our daily lives. Some teachings deal with the highest path to liberation, how to make a complete end of suffering. But there is also some smaller and practical advice that are very relevant for our daily lives. Right speech. What kind of livelihood should we have? What kind of actions are wholesome? What kind of actions are unwholesome? These are all important questions. What occupation should I undertake? These are all very practical, day-to-day questions. In terms of communication, of course we all know communication is very important. If it goes right, it's fantastic. You're very much in harmony with people around you. But in those instances where it does not go right, we feel very bad about that. And it can have a big emotional impact if our relationships with our family or friends are not going smoothly. And that's natural. Even at the Buddha's time that happened. But fortunately, the Buddha also had tools and methods of how to overcome difficulties in relationships, and even in case something has really gone badly in the past, there's sometimes, maybe you've noticed, there can be a sense of resentment. If something really bad happened with a person, the mind doesn't forget. Even though you're trying to move on, but actually the mind still harbors a bit of a grudge or resentment against the person. There's nothing new. 2,600 years, the same existed. Actually, wouldn't it be nice to be able to overcome this, to simply recognize, okay, that didn't go well, but then there's nothing left that I can do about that, let's move on. And even though you try to move on, the mind still, whenever it sees that person coming around the corner, you again. Welcome. Welcome to my house. So I wonder, how could we overcome this kind of grudge and resentment and look at each other with fresh eyes? Every time you see each other, it's like a new person. Not to the degree of being naive and letting ourselves be abused or hurt the next time. We can protect ourselves, that's okay. But again, the anger or resentment, dosa, does not serve us any good purpose. Actually, there's one sutta where the Buddha 5 methods of how to overcome resentment. Shall we have a look at it? Ankuttara 5.161. Removing resentment, number 1. Buddha addresses the monks. He says, Bhikkhus, there are these 5 ways of removing resentment by which a bhikkhu should entirely remove resentment when it has arisen toward anyone. 5 ways. What 5? Number 1. One should develop loving kindness for the person one resents. In this way, one should remove resentment toward that person. Of course, we have all heard of loving kindness. It's nothing new. But the Buddha says here, loving kindness and resentment cannot coexist in the mind. It's either this or that. You cannot have both. So, by cultivating loving kindness, you can chase away resentment. And of course, it's easier to cultivate loving kindness with people whom one likes or has some natural affection for. But there's also another sutta where the Buddha says, starting with that person for whom something has happened in the past, starting with that person, one radiates loving kindness to him or her, and then to all beings. So actually in the suttas, even starting with some people call the enemy, or even with that is okay. But you have to really be careful when you do loving kindness meditation for him. May you be well, may you be happy, that you really also mean it from your heart. There's not a sense of, may you be well, may you be happy, free from suffering. But really softening one's heart and say, we all want to be happy. And that person's mother and father, they also have his best wishes in mind. And in fact, if somebody is doing something bad to others, maybe has said something bad to you, most likely he or she also was not happy at that time. Because a happy person doesn't injure others, doesn't go around and is rude. It doesn't have to, because you're happy inside. So actually a person who is a bit naughty or rude deserves our wish for happiness, because most likely that person is not happy. And that's why he chooses to be rude and rough and the emotions come out. So wishing that person really from the bottom of our heart to be well and happy, that is actually both for his good but also for our own good. Because with this loving kindness, with this wholesome wish, the resentment cannot survive. Because you want him to be well. You want her to be happy. But when you do loving kindness towards a person, it's important that you stay really on the topic, on the wish for his or her well-being. And not to warm up all the stories that you remember from the past, or the incident that happened maybe long ago. This is now not the time to rehearse all of that. That's already the past. So we just take the person in general and wish him to be happy. So this is one way of reducing, lowering, or even removing entirely resentment towards that person. Then the Buddha says, there's also another way. One should develop compassion for the person one resents. In this way, one should remove the resentments towards him. Compassion. What is the difference between loving kindness and compassion? Isn't this the same? Is there any difference? What is the difference? Loving kindness, when you radiate loving kindness to a person, you wish that person to be happy. This is your wish. You imagine that person smiling and happy and in a good state. Whereas compassion is directed towards people or beings who are suffering. And the wish is, may you be free from suffering. It is a bit similar, may you be happy, or may you be free from suffering. But actually with compassion, may you be free from suffering. You imagine the person in a bad state, not in a happy state. A person who has either physical or mental difficulties, and you imagine that person to come out of that. You wish for that person to get better. But the object is the person who is suffering, not the person who is happy already. So this is the difference between compassion for these poor people, or people who don't have enough resources, or some mental difficulties. So this is compassion, whereas loving kindness is for everyone simply the wish to be happy, regardless whether they suffer or not. So the Buddha says here, towards a person against whom one holds a grudge or resentment, such a person also deserves our compassion. Relates a little bit what I said earlier, because a person who maybe has done something to us, was not in a good state, was not happy, was suffering him or herself, therefore deserves our compassion. Because, I don't want you to suffer. I want you to be happy. And of course, if she's happy, also it's good for me, because then it's not doing anything bad. But then it's a different aspect. Yeah? Also, we understand that a person is angry or hostile or has been mistreating you in one way or another. There is also the law of karma there. And the law of karma suggests an action that is unwholesome, like violence or harsh speech. That action will produce unpleasant result for the person who is doing it in the future. So knowing this, a person who has been rude to you also deserves your compassion in advance, because you know eventually he or she will get the bad results, the unpleasant results of that action. Isn't it? Because we don't understand the law of karma, and somebody treating you unfairly, unkindly, rudely, that is unwholesome and will surely produce, unfortunately, bad results for that person. So she deserves our compassion already, because surely eventually will have to suffer on account of these actions. So again, compassion softens our heart, makes us feeling with others. Not that we also have to suffer with the other person, but it softens our heart, makes us more receptive, and we have a deep wish for people to overcome their suffering. No being likes to suffer. Not even animals. Some people think, animals have no feelings, because some of them we cannot hear, like a fish. It doesn't scream, right? No problem. So whether we hear it or not, or whether we understand their language or not, makes no difference in whether they have emotions and feelings, suffering or not. So they can have true experience of suffering and of pain, and that deserves, again, our compassion. Because we know from our own experience how pain feels. And nobody likes it. So if I don't like pain, then most likely you also won't like it. So I've never met a person who says, yeah, pain is really what I'm going for. So if we don't want it, and we wouldn't wish it to any of our close friends or family members, actually we shouldn't wish it upon anyone. So there's this wish, even for people who have harmed us in the past. May you be free from suffering. Just like a mother. It doesn't matter what the child has done. In the end, it's still your son, it's still your daughter. You still love him. And even other people might say, there's nothing good about this person. He's a very terrible fellow. What kind of mother have you been anyway? Nonetheless, you cannot help but have compassion, love for the person, for your child. It's good. It's supposed to be like that. So in the same way, our compassion, regardless of what the person has done in the past, he or she deserves our compassion, our loving kindness. So this is the second way of overcoming resentment. Number 3, one should develop equanimity towards the person one resents. In this way, one should remove the resentment toward that person. Equanimity. So now we are not trying anymore to feel and empathize with him. Now it's more, okay, he's doing his things. I cannot change the person high likelihood, probably you've tried already once, or twice, or 100 times. That person doesn't change. Have you had that experience before? Yeah. I think everybody who has a husband or wife, or children, or parents, or friends, well, it's not easy to change others. Because it's not even easy to change yourself. How much more difficult is it to change others? Especially if they don't even want to change. So forget it. So there comes a time where you can realize if the person does not want to see his fault and does not want to change, there's no point of me spending more energy running into the same wall again and again. So it's not going to change. I'm just going to get hurt. So in this way, you can establish the mind in equanimity. That's how life is. That's how samsara is. That's part of samsara. Being born comes with suffering, disappointments. That's part of it. People are people. We cannot expect everyone to be perfect. And we accept. That's fine. Okay. That's how the person likes to act. In some circumstances, I might want to protect myself. Or I may choose sometimes not to spend so much time with a person who tends to be cruel or very harmful to me. That's okay. You can perfectly protect yourself or avoid contact or reduce contact if you cannot avoid completely. That's good, that's fine, no problem. But at some point you have to understand, actually, there's nothing you can do to change the person. So then it's time to accept, okay? Have a sense of equanimity about that. And in fact, even though people have their faults, but, it could come much worse, isn't it? I mean, somebody might not be kind always, but there are other people who are killers, who are stealing, or really bad things. So if your friend or family member is not in that category, well, it's not so bad. It doesn't have to be a saint. If you want to meet saints, you come to DIMS, go to meditation retreats. That's the place where maybe you have a chance of running into holy people, into Aryas. But then don't have that expectation for your family, for your people on the workplace, for your boss. So they're not claiming it either, so it's okay. So we have a sense of equanimity. Okay. Letting people be themselves, giving them the time to develop on their own, not pushing people over what they are capable to do. So, and then stepping back. Not with resentment, just with wisdom. Why am I going to hurt myself again and again? It's not producing any effect. So equanimity is a third step of overcoming resentment. Okay, number 4. One should disregard the person one resents and pay no attention to him. In this way, one should remove the resentment toward that person. So, not spending a lot of time with the person where you already know it's usually going down a bad path. And it's not just time one spends physically together. Disregarding can also have a mental function, or a mental disregarding. Not spending time with the person in your mind. Not warming up the same old story again and again, isn't it? Because that is what fuels the resentment. It needs fuel, like everything. Like a fire needs fuel. Some wood, and what else? Oil sometimes depends on what the fire subsists on. So without fuel, without oxygen, the fire will go out. So in the same way, if you keep fueling the resentment by warming up and remembering and rehearsing the incident in great detail, what the person said or did, it's not easy for the resentment to go away if you keep putting in the fire. So we disregard, in a sense. We don't entertain that thought anymore. Next time it comes up, okay, I've thought about that already often enough. It's time to move on. So in this way, over time, resentment will also reduce. Because it's not so active anymore in the mind. Especially for situations that have happened long ago. You have to let things heal also at some point. quite regularly one can see often in couples who are married for many years. There can be a tendency, oh, okay, everything okay, and then something comes up in the relationship, and then sure enough, one of them will bring up an old story. Yeah, like last time, 20 years ago. So in this way, a wound can never heal. It's like putting salt into the same old wound again and again. Don't do that. It doesn't serve any purpose. You had your time to discuss that topic 20 years ago. If you haven't resolved it, you won't resolve it now probably also. So it's time to move on. Because by bringing it up again and again, it doesn't matter how right you are and how wrong the other person was. It's not going to help. It just hurts your relationship. So you move on. Even the monks in our Vinaya rules, we also have a similar principle in our Vinaya rules. If there has been a dispute in the Sangha, first the monks should discuss the issue in great depth, try to come to an unanimous conclusion or decision. But if they can't, then they can have a vote of majority by whatever is the preference of the majority, then that's how will be decided. But even they don't even want to vote. They're just so upset with each other or still want to dispute. Then the Buddha says, after a long time, if there's nothing working, they have to put the item down and agree to disagree. And even so, there might be some hurt feelings because maybe in the discussion before there were some words used that were not kind and polite. Buddha says, we let it grow over with grass. Let it cover with grass. Meaning to say, let the grass take over, meaning don't attend to it, let it be overgrown, you don't warm up that old story anymore. So you already made effort to settle it at that time. You discussed it in great length. You cannot come to a conclusion, to a decision, to an agreeable thing. Then time to move on. Let it cover over with grass. Don't attend to it anymore. So in some circumstances, that's also necessary. So you don't attend to it with your mind anymore, or to that person. So this was the fourth way. And lastly, one should apply the idea of the ownership of karma to the person one resents. Thus, this Venerable One, referring to monks, this person is the owner of his karma, the heir of his karma. He has karma as his origin, karma as his relative, karma as his resort. He will be the heir of any karma he does, good or bad. In this way, one should remove resentment towards that person. So reflecting on the law of karma, if something has done something unwholesome, you don't have to set it right or teach him a lesson. If somebody has been abusive or bad, sometimes you even can't do much anyway. But you can trust in the law of karma. Somebody did something unwholesome, he will get the results. So if somebody has done something wholesome, he will also get the results. In fact, sometimes it's quite difficult to know what is people's intention. Because just because I don't like something does not necessarily mean that the person really was trying to hurt or to harm me. I might just not like what the person does, but the person can have very good intentions. So really to know for sure that the person had bad intentions, you have to be able to read her mind. If you cannot read her mind, your second option is to ask. I would like to find out a bit more, why were you doing like this, or what is the reason that you said that? I would like to understand, can you explain to me? So, but by not being able to read the person's mind and not even asking and inquiring politely, and then jumping to conclusions, surely that person is out to get me. Again, that is not going to be helpful. And if the person really did something unwholesome, we can trust in the law of karma. He will get his result. He might not like it. But maybe in a sense you can say, oh, serve him well. So you don't have necessarily to pay that person a lesson about how bad he or she was or how bad it is that he did. He will get the lesson through the law of karma eventually. Because the karma will reward the wholesome deeds with pleasant experience, and the unwholesome deeds with unpleasant experience. So in that sense, actually, you can kind of step back and relax and just let things unfold. Not with the evil wish that the person suffers, not in that direction, but with the understanding, okay, you've done something bad, it seems, so just be ready, be prepared. It will cause some effects for you also in the end. So this is wisdom. Not with a sense of wishing for that person to suffer, of course, but also with understanding. I don't have to set that right or teach that person a lesson. So the law of karma and understanding it also helps us to close things and to let things settle that don't require any further action. And we know deep down things will be okay. It will balance out, The law of karma is very fair. It doesn't have any buddies, any good friends. It applies to everyone in the same manner. So in this way we can trust the process and our resentment can go away. Oh, amazing, huh? The Buddha's teachings, so old and so relevant. Out of these 5 methods, which one do you think is the most relevant or could be the most helpful for you? The first one was loving kindness. Second one, loving kindness, compassion. Number 3, equanimity, right. Then, to disregard the person, not to entertain him, not to spend time physically and mentally. And lastly, okay, which one do you find is the most applicable for you? Which one is the most interesting? Loving kindness? Yeah, that can do the job. Any others? Which one do you find interesting or relevant? The last one. You will get your results. Just wait for it. Just wait for it. Yeah. Actually, the last one also very easy to do. Because you don't even have to meditate and close your eyes. You can just remind yourself. The law of karma will set things straight. And sometimes we don't know anyway. What did he mean? What were her intentions? So rather than jumping to conclusions, we can trust the process. Yeah, the last one, I also think that's a very potent one. And also not harboring the thought about a person, about that story again and again. That's also a very important one. As I said earlier, otherwise if you constantly put salt into old wounds, things can never heal. So disassociating from the person and from the memory to some degree. You learn your lesson and move on. So in this way, I hope there will be no more resentment for anyone. Now this is very relevant because it is by true resentment that even though a person might have changed, you meet the same person again a time later and he himself or she herself may have developed. And it's not the same person anymore as 10 years ago. But in your mind, it's still the same person. So it's important that we treat each other every time we meet, fresh, with kind eyes. And see at that time, what does the person say right now? Not what she said 20 years ago. Especially in spiritual circles, like Dhamma circles, where people actively try to develop their mind. They actively try to improve. It's to be expected that people will change faster even than people who are actually not that actively engaged in improving their mind, watching their mind, applying mindfulness. But here in Dhamma circles, almost you never know. You have seen a person last week, this week can be a completely different person, has done a lot of meditation, Dhamma practice, going to retreats. People change, and that's good. So it's important for us also not to be stuck in the past, but every time you see a person, the person in front of you, you take him as a fresh person. Who is the most important person in your life? Always the one who is straight in front of you right now. So any moment you're with one person, that should be the most important person at that time. So this is also a good principle to abide by. Okay, I would say we leave it at that for today.